Hey folks, before we launch into the episode, we have a sponsor, and our sponsor today is drinkhrw.com. And this company is all about the magic of molecular hydrogen. They make the most incredible molecular hydrogen products. So they make these tablets that you can easily just drop into your glass of water every single morning as you start your day, which is exactly how I start my day. I start my day with 2 tablets of molecular hydrogen, this stuff, in water with a squeeze of lemon, and that's what I take my supplements with. So why do I do that? I do this because molecular hydrogen is this amazing foundation supplement that I include in mine and pretty much every protocol that I write for my clients. And I got to tell you, there's not a lot of things that I include for everybody because I do believe that everybody needs different stuff. Everybody has different needs. But when it comes to molecular hydrogen, when we talk about a supplement that can help to manage inflammation, reduce inflammation, it helps to reduce pain in many cases. It helps to balance blood sugar, right? So improve insulin sensitivity. And when you hit even just those 2 markers, we are talking about already upgrading your body's ability to function really well during the day. Also really good for energy, really good for recovery for athletes. It's a pretty amazing substance, especially when we think of the fact that molecular hydrogen as a molecule is the tiniest molecule. It's the first molecule on the periodic table, but it's because it's so tiny that it is able to get in where it needs to in the cell and initiate all of these incredible processes. Drink HRW also has tablets that you can drop into your bathtub so that you can soak your whole body in it, get the benefits for your skin, get the benefits systemically into your body. So your skin is your largest organ of absorption, guys. So this is a great way to get your molecular hydrogen. It's also really great for people who've got aches and pains and who are sore. It helps to mitigate all of that inflammation. So what are some of the other reasons why you might want to drink molecular hydrogen? Well, as travel is starting to come back, is making a comeback, then I drink molecular hydrogen on my flight. I start 30 minutes before the flight and I take it every 90 minutes while I'm flying, because when we're way up in the sky like that, we are actually exposed to radiation, and molecular hydrogen has been shown to be helpful at mitigating the negative effects of that radiation on our bodies. So ultimately, supplementing with molecular hydrogen is all about aging well. It's about longevity, and it's about managing your body system so that you can look, feel, and perform your best. And this supplement, molecular hydrogen, delivers on these points like nothing else. And one of the things I forgot to mention is that molecular hydrogen actually combats oxidative stress. And it's not just anti-inflammatory, it's selective antioxidant. Plus, it also helps to support a healthy inflammatory response. So you guys, obviously, I can keep talking about this for a really long time. What I'm going to invite you to do is visit the drinkhrw.com/superhuman website and check out the research for yourself. If you're one of those people that needs to see it for yourself, that needs to dig into the research, I will tell you that this website, this company's website, is a wealth of information, and it's not just about them. It's just about all of the clinical trials, clinical studies, all of the research you could imagine on pretty much any topic you can imagine around molecular hydrogen to help you to make your own decision about whether or not this is right for you. Like I said, I personally recommend it to all of my clients. I use it myself every single day. But for some of you guys, and for many of you guys, we should always be informed. These guys have one of the best repositories of information on this compound out there. So drinkhrw.com/superhuman. And if you use promo code longevity10, you will save 10% on your purchase, anything that you buy, and you can use that promo code over and over and over again. So thank you so much for staying with me through this, and enjoy the episode. Hey folks, just a little bit of housekeeping before we launch into the episode.
Please remember that all of the information provided in these podcasts is for information purposes only. We are never offering treatments, cures, whatever for any kind of disease or medical condition. Anything you hear about here is going to be intriguing. There's some research around it, but make sure that you check with your medical provider before you go off and do any of this stuff for yourself. All right. So, enjoy the episode. And also, if you're looking to connect with me for any reason, with your comments, questions, whatever it may be, you can reach me through my website, which is natniddam.com, or you can find me on Facebook in the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group, or on MeWe in the Biohacking Superhuman Performance group. And of course, you can also follow me on Instagram, which is at Nathalie Niddam. Nathalie is with an H between the T and the A, the second A. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you guys. Enjoy the episode.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. Today we're doing things a little differently. So first of all, you can see I'm in a different place than usual. There's beautiful sun on my hair. I'm at my cottage, and it's a gorgeous day here. So if our connection gets a little wonky, you'll have to excuse us. It's cottage country. But today, the other thing I'm doing differently today is that I have my guest with me here for the introduction, which I don't normally do. And it's probably appropriate because Jean-François has been recording podcasts with me since before I had a podcast. Jean-François was my first podcast guest back when I just had a YouTube channel. And I can tell you guys that Jean-François Tremblay is nothing short of my mentor in this whole industry of the peptide world. But Jean-François Tremblay has a master's in pharmacology, and he is also the owner of CanLab Sciences, which is in my humble opinion, the best research lab out there right now, who are producing their own peptides and bioregulators. And, obviously for research purposes and for all of the good reasons that we know, their service is amazing. And of course, the quality is bar none. So welcome, Jean-François, to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you again.
Likewise, again, always a pleasure.
Yeah. So today on the agenda, we have some really exciting stuff, you guys. Some new things. So we're going to start by talking about a peptide called LL37, which, like so many peptides, is a naturally occurring peptide in the human body. It has very powerful, most people know it as having very powerful antimicrobial effects, but it actually has much more broad-ranging effects than that, including wound healing and stuff like that. However, there's a dark side to LL37, which is that it can be cytotoxic. So we're going to talk about LL37, the goods, the bads, and the uglies. We're then going to segue into what may be the best way to use LL37, which is a new type of peptide that Jean-François has been making for a little while now, but kind of testing it out on the market and has gotten some really amazing feedback on. And then we're going to move into bioregulators. So, and I'm not going to talk about what we're going to talk about now, because then I'd be talking for way too long. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about LL37, because I know that it's a peptide that people are they either sing its praises or they're like, oh my God, I used LL37 and my body couldn't take it. It caused too much of a Herx reaction, because it is a very, very powerful antimicrobial. So let's talk a little bit about LL37, Monsieur Tremblay.
Well, pretty much you covered it up in terms of effects and all that. It's a really good, antiviral. I talked about it. I did 2 podcasts on specifically that with Carl and Ore. You could look it up on its antiviral and specifically COVID-19 effect. It's very effective.
So this is for if somebody is sick, they might use it as part of a protocol to overcome the COVID.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Because it does 2 things. It disactivates the spikes, of the COVID-19, and it cloaks the receptors, the ACE2.
The
So
ACE2 receptors.
it
Wow.
makes it invisible. So those spikes, let's say, that are not deactivated, they can find the receptors. So it's a double thing that makes it very good to use if you have COVID. Preventively, it has been used in, it could be used in a nasal spray.
Okay.
Because we know that COVID is airborne.
Okay.
And it does enter through the respiratory tract. So to use a nasal spray, then you have it present. So you can catch it before it goes deeper.
But so is there any downside to that? Because, whenever we're using something that's very strong antimicrobial, it's not necessarily selective. And would it disrupt the microbiome in the nasal cavity, do you think? Or is it so specific?
That's the thing. I wouldn't use it like every day, all the time.
Okay.
But I would have, and actually it was found too, like xylitol is really good at that, nasal
xylitol,
spray.
yeah.
So I would do a mix of, I think xylitol, it's 11% solution. And I would throw in their LL37, because it's so local, the effect, you don't need much. So you would get maybe 25 to 50 microgram per spray. And I would use it selectively, where let's say you're about to go where there's going to be a risk of infection.
Yeah.
Then, you have a spray, and you'd be covered with one spray with both compounds for 4 to 6, probably more times. So basically that would, from separately, xylitol is close to 90% prevention.
So you could have a spray bottle of xylitol and one of the combination, and you might use the xylitol more often, and that combination
that'd be a better approach. Exactly. And or let's say planes, people, they freak out on planes, but in planes you have a negative pressure.
Yeah, there hasn't been
sucked in. You cannot get infected.
Well, I feel like we would have seen far bigger outbreaks coming off planes if being on a plane was a problem. Even though air travel has declined massively in the last 18 months, you would proportionately you'd see a disproportionate number of people getting sick on an airplane. So
and you don't see it because that negative pressure, and it's basically the same system we use in a white room for any chemical synthesis. We use that to synthesize peptides.
Yes.
Where the air is filtered, but there is a mild negative pressure, so it pulls out constantly the air, so it doesn't circulate inside.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that video we shot, we haven't published yet, which we will one day.
Yeah. But it is very good peptides, antimicrobial. Even there is 1 or 2 studies where they show its efficacy with HIV.
Yeah, I read that. I saw that on the paper. Actually, I mean, it's incredibly versatile, but it's also very, very it's very strong
because it is cytotoxic, and you see that from people using it. Many times they say, either if they use it for too long, so you have that accumulation of cytotoxicity, or if they decide, well, if that worked well, more will.
Yeah, more is better.
And then they start to feel really bad. And that's that cytotoxicity kicking in.
So let's explain cytotoxicity to people. So basically it's toxic to cells. Do you have any more information on that for people? Like, in terms of what that actually means in the body? I've always thought of it as a Herx reaction, like a healing crisis, because too many things are dying off. But is it that it's actual healthy cells that might be dying off at the same time?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. All right. So
toxic for the cells.
Okay. So it's a real double-edged sword, bottom line.
Big time.
Okay.
And then there is that group of researcher that did work on LL37, because when you read the specific article, they say, oh, based on the research we did developing not only LL37, because LL37 is a byproduct of a bigger protein
Yeah.
that is produced by the expression of a gene. And one of the big driver of that gene is vitamin D.
Yeah, that is an
So,
amazing,
so
that is
and
an
now you
amazing thing.
understand why vitamin D high levels are good for, like, specifically COVID-19, because then naturally you'll produce more down the path, you'll produce more LL37, and you'll get that effect, as long as it's not canceled out by other factors that your metabolism, because it's not the vitamin D. There you got that
So I wanted to
stimulates.
show this to people. Yeah.
Great. It's actually the 125 OH of the, and many times that conversion doesn't happen or is not efficient. So when you go for a blood test for vitamin D, you should ask to check those level, the 125
Actually,
OH.
interesting fact about that is I have a genetic variation that makes me very inefficient at converting the 25OH. Oh no, I'm inefficient at converting this of making vitamin D in the first place. Where I get blocked is that 125OH then has to go through another conversion to be cleared out of the body.
Uh-huh.
And genetically, I don't clear it very well. So what's interesting about what you're saying here is, for me, I need to get my 125OH levels tested, because my 25OH could look low, but my 125OH could be high. So these are the finer points of vitamin D that people just don't know, right?
It's like when they do estrogen levels, they don't look at all the forms. There are forms
metabolites,
that are very bad, some that are very good. You really look to go. I'm not saying for everybody, but people that may have problems with estrogen, for example, or in that case, vitamin D, I think everybody should do it.
Yeah. To a point.
Anyway, you see it. So you have it like catalycidin gene that is expressed. That makes that protein, the catalycidin protein, and then it's cleaved to form LL37 and other peptides. But the
right.
one and you can see one factor to that effect is air pollution. So in that study, they found out that if there was, and they were specifically, when they talk about air pollution here, they were talking about nanoparticles of carbon, the ones you get from
this is big city. This is like big city air pollution, right?
Basically, yeah. So that and it kind of explain things like why you get more outbreaks in big cities, where air pollution is higher, or in countries like India where you had huge outbreaks. I mean, they burn carbon. To make electricity.
And so it literally shuts down your LL37. Like, that's actually a crazy piece of information, right?
It is.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so bottom line, LL37 is a downstream metabolite of vitamin D and how it acts on the catalycidin gene. And so it's naturally occurring in the human body. The truth is that in the body, probably we make very small amounts of this, because we only need small amounts, because it's cytotoxic. So bigger amounts is going to be a negative. And also, guys, for those of you who are listening to this and not watching on YouTube, there's a bracket here that highlights that this is really active in the respiratory tract and other mucosal tissues.
But that's because the study was specifically done on COVID-19. So they know it's airborne, but we see that happening in the digestive tracts too. But it wasn't relevant for that study.
Okay. But the digestive tract has mucosal tissue in it.
Yeah.
As well. So it's the whole thing.
No, you don't get contaminated by COVID-19.
No. Yeah. Okay. All right. So So the good news of LL37, very powerful, very effective. The bad news of LL37 is too much is not so good. So because of this whole cytotoxic effect. So whose idea was it? Do you know? There's now a new hybrid peptide, which actually it's the first time I've heard of a hybrid peptide. I'm sure there's others, but this one is where some really smart person said, okay, we don't like the cytotoxicity of LL37. Let's see how we could mitigate that. And they did. They created a new hybrid peptide. And look at me. I look like I'm in one of those weird movies.
Yeah, it's like that
Like I'm
series
stuck in
in
yeah.
Manifest.
Yeah. Okay, guys.
Everything
Sorry.
is connected.
It's the angle of the sun coming in through the skylight. I'm sure it'll pass.
Yeah,
Okay.
you have that those researchers that very bright. They thought, well, they are doing research, and they did a bunch of research previously on the L37 and variants. You have L31, and them and other found that the most effective was L37. And of course, they realized that it was cytotoxic. So they started to think, okay, what could we do? What could we do? And of course, they knew about Thymosin Alpha 1 that has a very strong effect on the immune system. And they say, and it's anti-cytotoxic.
Oh, so it protects cells. That makes sense.
Yeah. So they say, okay, what can we do? How about we make a hybrid? So we hook them together, not the full molecule, but let's find on the molecule which part has the effect we want for both. And let's hook that up together and let's see what happened. And they tried many variants of it. And they came up with one variant that is very, very effective at what it does, which is anti-inflammatory. And they were looking in that case, specifically the gastrointestinal tract.
Yeah.
And they found a much, much, much lower cytotoxicity. So there you go. The hybrid LL37 Thymosin Alpha 1 was born.
Wow.
Now they didn't look at the actual effect of the immune system of that branch. They really wanted to look for the anti-inflammatory in cases of IBS, for example.
Right.
And but it was all done on mice and all that. So before we put it on the market, samples sent to people who own big mice and things like that. They tried
really big mice with arms and legs.
And the feedback were ridiculous. I have this one guy that had IBS problem for a very long time, and he tried it the first day. All the effects of that problem were gone. Like,
yeah, his symptoms just vanished.
And the second day he pushed it, that day he ate on purpose all the foods and drinks he knew would trigger his IBS, and nothing happened.
That's crazy. I mean, that is nuts, right? That in one
it's rare you see something working that well so fast without side effects.
Okay, now this was a while ago. Has he kept using it? Is he still using it?
Yeah.
Does it still work?
And he bought a bunch more.
I'm sure.
Because he's a clinician too, and now he's using it with most of his clients. And he is like, in his term, he called it a godsend peptide. He couldn't believe it. And he has been working with peptides for a long time.
Yeah.
Longer than 99% of the people today, including, I won't name anybody.
No, let's not name names.
And high dosages and everything. He knows what to expect from peptides, and he was amazed by this one.
Yeah. Yeah, so, no, I know who you're talking about. And he is, I mean, he's very daring with his peptide protocols and achieves amazing results, actually.
There you go.
Okay, so has he now?
But just a little parenthesis, because up to today, people, sometimes I suggest high dosages of peptides, but people need to realize something. We don't make those numbers up. If you were to actually read the articles, let's say Thymosin beta-4, and translate to human dosage, you get those numbers. There is that study they did for ischemic heart attack after, and they were giving 16 average because they were giving a shot every 4 days. But if you average it, it was, and that's in 16 milligrams a day
Of
Thymosin beta-4.
wow.
So people, they think it's a high dosage. Well, yeah, but it's a high dosage that you
It's a
need.
therapeutic.
And you know, we don't make up those numbers. Read the studies, convert when they're done in mice to human, and sometimes you'll get dosage up to 100, 200 milligrams,
Yeah.
which practically doesn't make it, you know, it's not for everybody money-wise, but we don't make up those numbers. They're all there in the studies.
Yeah.
It's just that most people, they just look at the abstract and
Well, I mean, you
they
know,
don't go that far.
yeah, not everybody's really that adept at reading studies in the first place. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems that this hybrid peptide is something of a very amazing compound for things like IBS. Has anything else come back from any of the other people who've tried it, or not just yet?
No, nothing,
still
which is a
early
good
days.
sign. You know, when it's good, you don't hear nothing. If there's something bad, you'll hear about it.
No, I understand. but-
So you know, they keep using it, and the couple I'm in touch with over the phone, they keep saying, "Wow."
yeah. So
And that has been almost a month now.
So for IBS, what are we talking about here? We're talking about people who are either have diarrhea or constipation or just some dysregulation.
Inflammation in the bowel, you know, anything inflammatory in the
Any
gut.
inflammatory, okay.
Yeah.
Without naming conditions. Again. And so do we have like a dosage range that we want to share with people?
They did one study on mice, and that's why I was surprised, because with the mice, they were giving 1 milligram per kilogram per day.
Okay.
So if you convert, you know, mice to human, you divide that 1 milligram by 12.3.
Yeah.
So roughly, let's say we divide by 10, that would be 0.1 milligram.
Yeah. Per kilo?
Per kilo. So if you weigh 70 kilogram, that would be 7 milligrams per day, which is, again, would make it a bit prohibitive. But I didn't give that information. And because there was a LL37 thing and a mild cytotoxicity, I told them start low, like if it was LL37. So they started at 0.1 milligram per day.
Yeah.
And then bumped it up, and they found the strongest effect at 0.4 milligrams. And they found the effect to last about 7-8 hours. And that man weighs about 100 kilos. So to give you
He's a bigger guy. Yeah. So small.
So if you were a woman, probably 200-300 micrograms 2-3 times a day would do it.
Okay. And so far they just keep using it. We don't know if in a month or two after using it, they might be able to stop and the effects might be long lasting.
Yeah. Or die. I don't know. We'll have to wait.
Nice, Jean-François. So I think that little tongue-in-cheek comment bears
No, I don't see them dying.
Well, he doesn't. No. But I do think it's important for people to understand that this isn't like
that is highly still. It's highly experimental.
Very like there's no long-term.
But it seems today that's the norm. You know, they give people things and.
Yeah,
the crowd becomes the experiment. So we're just
but there's no long-term trial on this one, you guys. So as much as everything we talk about here is not it's not an invitation to do it necessarily.
No, I'm just saying what I do.
And you've just got to know that that this one in particular is quite new. So it's
very new in its application, and even the studies, they're like new too. It's new everything.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that's our new hybrid peptide, which is still, folks, it looks promising, but it's still very, very new. It's no long-term studies. So the initial feedback is that it seems to be really helpful for inflammatory conditions in the bowel or in the digestive tract. Only time will tell if those effects are longer lasting and if there should be any kind of residual issues.
I would see it as a relief. I don't see it healing the problem.
Yeah. So it
still would need to be attended. But I've seen that a lot with Crohn's disease and BPC 157, which is amazingly good. And what I've seen people do, because nobody's perfect and doesn't make them bad people.
Yeah.
They would follow everything, like the diet, everything, use a peptide, 3 months, they're good. And then, of course, they keep doing, if they maintain the diet, usually they're good, but who does?
Yeah.
Unless you're like control free and everything.
Well, it depends on the person for sure.
Yeah, it's but very few people do actually. So usually then they would, if they relapse, they would do a bit of, because of course the relapse won't bring them all the way down, that bad state they were. So maybe if for a few days, I don't know, Christmas time, whatever, they relapse, then they would do a bit of BPC that would bring them back to that nice state, and do that once in a while. So in terms of while you're doing a therapy to heal your IBS problem, during the therapy, you could use that peptide that would relieve the symptoms.
Well, and decrease some inflammation.
Don't think it's it's fixing it because it's relieved.
Yeah.
It's like if you have a headache, you take aspirins, the headache is gone, but you would still to look into, okay, why did I get the headache?
Exactly.
Do something about that.
Yeah. Although you would think that in collaboration with the BPC 157, which is going to help with more of the healing, if you calm down the inflammation, it might be able to be then that much more effective. So as woven in as part of a protocol, it may turn out to be very useful. Okay, cool. All right. So on to our next topic. Which is we're going to talk about the bioregulators. Bioregulators are, well, they're of high interest these days. They've always been of high interest, certainly to people like you who knew about them. And over the last little while, there's been a lot more information that's been coming out. There's a couple of clinical human trials that are happening. One in North America that I actually just joined. That's looking at the effect of bioregulators on people's biological age versus their chronological age. Exactly. So the speed at which you age. Having said that, you've been on the bioregulator train for a long time. CanLab's been manufacturing the synthetic versions of the bioregulators. So bioregulators originally are derived from organs, glands, or tissues from young calves. Typically, certainly the ones that are in use in Russia, and where they've isolated these 2 to 4 amino acid chains that will bind to the DNA and upregulate the synthesis of a protein. So they, in essence, help to rejuvenate and restore function to the tissue, gland, or organ that they're specific to. But they're not, learning from you, they're not always as specific as we thought. Sometimes they have effects in other tissues as well. We're not going to talk about that right now. So we have the biologic, and then we have the synthetic, which is essentially a recreation of that exact amino acid chain in the exact sequence because they're organized sometimes geometrically, right? So it's not A plus B plus C. There's very specific ways that the bonds have to happen. But then we have the synthetics. And I've heard Dr. Kevinson speak about how, in his mind, the synthetic, and from what we've also seen, the synthetic seems to be faster acting, but maybe not always as long acting as the biologic, which is slower acting and maybe longer acting. And I don't know And I know that you have your point of view on this, so we're getting to you.
Okay, first disclosure. Of course, I'm going to push the synthetic because we make the synthetic. As the one who pushed the oral version extract, turns out that they sell the extract. So, it's normal that we each have that bias.
Yeah, but I think we can also agree that they may have different properties.
But when you look at the actual source of both, so to say, which is the Cavinson Institute for Longevity in St. Petersburg, they use both.
Yeah,
and
they do.
What I see is for a practical reason. The synthetic, you need to take them. Well, no, you could even take them orally. But the point is, it would be much more expensive because, listen, for the more they want us to think that they're orally available, I believe they are. But to what degree? Even vitamins at one point, some people, they have Alzheimer symptoms just because they don't absorb some vitamin B's anymore, which we're supposed to absorb.
Yeah,
so their track is so bad, their digestion processes are so bad that they don't absorb those vitamins.
Yeah.
Of course, that's an extreme. So,
but I think because the bioregulators, the only way I will push back on this a little bit, because I think the bioregulators are so small that it's not like your body has to break them down. If you're trying to extract them from food, it's a different story, like your ability to break down the food. But the other thing I want to say is that the dosages are much, much higher. Like it's 20 milligrams or 200 milligrams, whereas with a synthetic bioregulator, you need to, and we're going to get to that, you need
Yes.
a fraction of that, right? So to your point, they have to put a lot more into those capsules to get an effect.
A percentage absorb.
Yeah.
And you have that clinical thing too. Some of Cavinson's studies were done with oral.
Yeah.
But there was like 14,000 people in one study, over 3,000. If they start to inject the peptide, you're going to lose a big. If they take oral, you're pretty sure. And plus, it was Russia, as that guy doing those studies mentioned. It was communist Russia. If they would tell them
they were in Siberia.
they did it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
I don't know that we want to get in. I mean, I think that there's value to both. I think that the synthetic, what I've seen is that you tend to see a much faster uptake and a faster effect from the synthetic, for sure.
Of course, because
it's exactly what you
dosage, you don't build up. You start to you jump start from the first day.
Yeah.
Because if you want, we'll come to that. A big misunderstanding happened over the last decades. And it's specifically with Epitalon and Epitalamine. For a longest time, for some reason, we believe they were the same thing. And people would be confused because they would see dosages for Epitalamine, in Cavinson studies where it would stay 10 milligrams per day for 10 days.
Yeah.
And thinking it was for Epitalon, they applied it. But other part of the confusion is that 15, 20 years ago, there was no online translation. It was translated, and so people thought when they would see the actual Epitalon dosages, because there are studies done on the synthetic one, and the dosage were in micrograms. And somehow it was assumed that it was a mistake in translation, or no, they say they must have meant milligrams. They wrote microgram. It's almost like we didn't want to see it or believe it, because when you look at it, it's pretty clear. So basically, the thing is, that protocol of 10 milligrams for 10 days. That's not for Epitalon, that's for epitalamine. And you see the same thing happening with, the Thymosin, which is the thymus extract, and the Thymogen, which is the active peptide. Dosages, it's 100 folds less. So they see the same effect with Thymogen at 0.1 milligram per day as with 10 milligrams of Thymosin
per day.
And with Epitalon, it's actually bigger. It's 100 to 500 times. So there is one study, it is stated in the study, what they found is that the Epitalon, the synthetic one, was more 100 to 500 times more potent than epitalamine. So what does that mean is you don't need to take, if you have a business selling Epitalon, it's very counterproductive, but it's a fact. You don't need to take 5 or 10 milligrams a day. That's way too much. Actually, probably with 0.1 milligrams, you'd get away.
So 100 to 500 micrograms a day would be plenty, is what you're saying.
Would be plenty.
Yeah.
And knowing that, even myself, I'm still going to take 1 milligram a day, just to be on the safe side. Yeah. You cannot take too much of it.
Well, clearly, because
but that's way too much. And when you look at the price, and that's good for people because now it makes it much more accessible. You're talking 5 to 10 times cheaper to do therapy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would be very conservative and not do it or not as often as they should because of the price.
Yeah.
Now it really, really, really makes it affordable for everybody, and it makes it actually much more cheaper than doing the extracts, the oral or whichever form you're talking about. So I was part of it, mea culpa, because many times I suggested those milligrams.
Those 5 to 10 milligrams a day.
And I was just wrong. It's way too much.
Okay. So, we've talked about this beforehand, and I think, thank you for coming out and saying that to people. Because, from a, Lord knows if you were publicly traded on the stock exchange right now, your shares would be plummeting.
I am firm. Tesla. I got some shares.
Oh, you got some shares, Tesla. Yeah, but not your other company. The other company. But to be able to, and I think that's part of what's happened in the transition. What people have been seeing is all of a sudden the bioregulators are coming out in 20 milligram vials instead of 100 milligram vials. And as you've come to this realization, you've been transitioning the units that you're selling in so that it becomes more appropriate for people. So that, I, like you, I'm on the 1 milligram a day train, but definitely if I come across a client who feels financially that they can't handle even that, then to go to 0.5 milligram a day, they would still be getting a ton of, they would be getting the full benefit. So,
and I need to give credit where it's due. There is that one guy, is in this group, who posted on Reddit something about that. And, I made the link. I found out who it was. And, there are people who realized that before.
Yeah.
I've mentioned it, but it didn't come true. As I said, it's like people didn't want to believe that. Again, what I've said before, when you repeat a lie that often, then
it becomes the truth. Absolutely.
So, so there are people, I'm not saying I'm the first one who's seen it. No, there are a lot of people, and a few even in this group, that not in the group, but in other groups or other platform, who mentioned it, and they were right.
All right. Well, let this be a sea change. From now on, your daily, a person's daily dosage on bioregulators would be perfectly fine at 100 micrograms a day. And, the interesting thing about the bioregulators is there just doesn't seem to be a toxic dose. So it's never been found. So if you want to spend the money and see what happens at 10 times the dose, do 1 milligram a day, you can do that too.
And maybe
Theoretically,
I was going to say,
we need to go there.
I was going to say for therapeutic, like if I have, if people in my world have heart issues, vascular issues, high blood pressure, yeah, I'm going to be working more around those 1 milligram a day dosage for sure, and for longer. But for people who are optimized and just looking to keep that train going, then you may just not need to be going that high.
Exactly. Which is good news for everybody. Now everybody can go on Epitalon and all that, and
yeah, I mean,
money shouldn't be a concern anymore in that case.
Exactly, it's no longer an issue.
They become very, very affordable peptides.
Frankly, more affordable than the other peptides.
Than most, actually, yeah.
And the BPCs and the thymosin beta 4s. Okay, so that's the big kind of boom of this episode. And there were a couple of things we wanted to talk about. We wanted to talk a little bit about one of the things that, Epitalon gets talked about a lot with respect to resetting the circadian clock, restoring melatonin production, all of the downstream effects of what that means. And we know that melatonin is highly anti-inflammatory, it's anti-cancer and the whole 9 yards. But it seems that Epitalon itself is also very anti-cancer. And do you think, or certainly there's a lot of studies that have drawn lines between anti-tumor effects. I know that in some of Dr. Cavinson's studies, he talked about a dramatic decrease, especially in the elderly populations. When he repeated that study I think it was 75 to 85-year-olds or 65 to 85-year-olds.
And that
it was insane, right? It was the elderly people, but does that mean that Epitalon has independent anti-cancer? Or is it just, do you think it's just a downstream effect of upregulating of restoring melatonin?
No, not only that.
Resetting all those circadian clocks in the body.
I think it's going to work at resetting if you're in the proper setting of resetting. Meaning, let's say your circadian rhythm is out of whack because you go to bed at 3, 4 in the morning every night and you wake up, you have very, very bad sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to take Epitalon. Well, it's not going to work. I think first you need to reset your, readjust your sleep time and number of hours you sleep.
Oh, so you're saying address the sleep hygiene and take Epitalon. Yes,
exactly.
For sure.
So otherwise,
well, it's not going to do it otherwise if you insist on being up till.
So I think that's very important for people to understand. It's not going to fix it's not a free pass to partying every night. So that understood, yeah, of course it does that. But for the cancer thing, no, I think there are direct effect. Epitalon is the one that was the most studied. And that's why, too, again, it's taking forever, but I'm writing that white paper on bioregulators, where some study shows that some bioregulators have effects in other tissues that they're native tissues. I just took, Epitalon, it was shown for cancer. It has positive effect on the pancreas, on the heart itself. And you look at the study, it's not through an indirect effect. It's a direct effect in those tissue cells. Violin, same thing in the heart tissues. And I suspect that if there were more studies of those tissues and each peptides, probably we would find a lot more of those cross interactions.
Well, I actually came across one because I was looking into Cardilax, the one for cartilage. Well, Cardilax has huge implications, positive implications, not just for cartilage, but for skin, because it upregulates elastin as well as collagen, but also for the heart, because the heart is highly dependent on that flexibility, on the elastin and the collagen. So I was like, kind of blown away, right? Because you start to think, and it makes sense because the heart is not, as an organ, completely different than everything else in your body. Like it's going to share properties with other systems and tissues in the body. So it makes sense that it would be positively or even negatively affected. If you have a collagen problem, it might affect your heart. It might affect other tissues and organs and how they're held together. So anyway, just to that point, like looking at the play, I guess what I'm trying to say is we talk about BPC 157 being very pleiotropic. We didn't used to talk about bioregulators in the same way, but from what you're saying and from some of these papers, it sounds like they actually are pleiotropic.
Yeah, not individually, but if you use them all, I think you will cover, you would think, okay, I'm covering those 18 systems or organs, but I think you cover pretty much everything. What I believe, for example, and that's why, again, I mentioned it before, I'm really coming back to bioregulators as anti-aging versus other compounds like Mots-C, humanin, and all that, because I strongly believe that if you upregulate all the systems and organs that produce those peptides, then they will be upregulated too as an effect. It just, we don't know for sure because no studies were done on that specifically. But it would make sense to think that.
Well, and I see the Mots-C as more like an intervention.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like if you're so down, if your system is so low that you kind of need that push, but it's temporary. What you're saying, which makes total sense, if you can upgrade the system so that you no longer need that outside intervention, that's where you've really hit the money.
And big time. And that's why, at least preventively, like, which would be really what we call anti-aging or healthy aging. I think the core of the protocol should be around bioregulators. That's a couple of other ones that, well, GHK, I think we're going to talk a bit about it.
We are going to talk about it. I secretly believe it should be a bioregulator. I just think it hasn't gotten the classification yet.
Thymosin beta-4, there is that article written by a group of researchers that has done research on thymosin beta-4, mainly with the heart. But what they found is that thymosin beta-4 kind of make the cell of the heart remember its native state, when it was in the womb. And that's amazing. And they theorize that it's probably not the only one. There is a bunch of other ones. I guess they didn't look into bioregulators and a few of those other ones. So thymosin beta-4 is an amazing peptide to repair, and it's inflammatory and all that. But it does even more than that. It has that effect that it can be classified to me as an anti-aging compound. Of course, smaller dosages all the time, not all the time, but basically at this point, the anti-aging protocols I prefer are around bioregulators with thymosin beta-4 once in a while, and GHK as I include it as a bioregulator. And tyrotropin.
TRH?
It's three amino acid.
We have to do an episode just on TRH one day.
And funny, there is some of the Cavinson studies where they actually looked into DSIP and found he put it in the anti-aging.
Really?
Yeah, for other effects than only on the delta sleep. So, there are a few other peptides that fall in those categories. But I wouldn't go, okay, for example, I'm taking Mots-C right now, but not for its anti-aging thing. It's really for his, because again, I'm on a diet. I started to train again. So, to support all that. So technically it's a therapeutic approach,
It's an intervention. Yeah.
an
Yeah.
intervention. But I wouldn't see it as, at this point, if you're doing all the bioregulators and all that, I don't see it. You don't need to do all those other ones. As before, I would suggest, to cycle, but, to throw in all those. No, you don't. Or again, unless, but then it becomes an intervention. Unless you have, when you start, let's say you begin, you say, okay, I want to improve all that. And it turns out I have some chronic fatigue, I have this, then yeah, you use them. But again, that's an interventional
You're
part.
talking about the Mots-Cs now.
So you fix things at the beginning, and then you let those peptides upregulate all your system, so you won't depend on those peptides in the future. But you can use them at the beginning to jumpstart things.
For sure. Well, the Mots-C for the energy, for people who are really lacking in energy, to at least help them in the short term, kind of reclaim.
Because what people don't, specifically about Mots-C, it revs up the mitochondria, which is not normal. That's why you can feel it if you take it at night. Many times you will have a hard time sleeping because everything is overrunning. And in nature, Stephen Hawking, there is no free lunch in nature. You'll pay a price for that eventually. So it's...
Well, if nothing else, you get a massive increase in reactive oxygen species, right?
For example.
So, you have to do something to mitigate the ROS at the same time. So, but definitely, and what I've seen with Mots-C, it seems to me, is when somebody who really needs it uses it, it works.
It's amazing.
Beautiful things for them. When somebody who doesn't need it uses it, they can't sleep. They're wired. Like you see it in them. Like it does not, it makes them feel like crap. So that one's a very interesting peptide for that reason, actually.
And it's funny that happened to me. First time I used Mots-C, I was like that. There are nights I would sleep only 2-3 hours and I would be fine.
Well, you would think you were fine, but yeah.
Yeah. and all the subsequent times I did it, it didn't happen. And that's probably I had low Mots-C levels. I brought them up. Yeah. And through the other peptides I was using, upregulating things, then probably, I had a drop there, brought it up, and
then you back off.
And then I backed off. And now I take Mots-C. It's funny, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't...
That doesn't make sense, though.
It doesn't, it doesn't wire me either.
Yeah.
But that makes me believe that I don't need it. I'm not liking Mots-C. Or maybe I got used to it.
Hard to say. I mean, that blows my theory out of the water, because if your mitochondria are optimized and you use Mots-C and you don't feel it, then it's not doing anything. And I don't think of Mots-C.
Well, I'm sure there are other factors in that.
Yeah, because I don't think of Mots-C particularly as a modulatory peptide. I think of, there's other peptides that are more modulatory in their behavior.
Exactly.
Mots-C, I see it as turning something on, like whether you need it or not, it's going to ramp up. So and for me, that means it's a peptide that has to be treated with more respect, because you can overdo things. And just like you said, you over-rev mitochondria, you're upregulating reactive oxygen species that, if they're not balanced, are going to be a negative on the system. So it's not something to be taken for granted. Okay. So the last thing we're going to talk about, because this is going to be turned into one of these marathon episodes, is GHK. So GHK, we mentioned before, I secretly believe that someday it may be inducted into the Hall of Bioregulators, just because of the way that it works, in that it acts directly on DNA. And
Cavinson once declared that he wished he had discovered it. So
yeah, so that says a lot right there, right? So
Anyway, so GHK has, I mean, I think was it Stanford University? Someone did this big study looking to see how many genes GHK actually acted upon. And it was shown to either flip genes on or off, like in 1,000 different genes, right?
No, more than
Or more,
3,000.
or maybe it was 4,000. Like it's huge. It's massive. So it has wound healing properties. It has scar tissue management, like it helps with scar tissue. It helps with skin. Obviously, it's the copper peptide. People will use it topically. And they can also use it systemically. So it's got, and I'm sure that there's massive things that it can do that we don't even know about yet, because if it can impact that many genes, obviously it's going to have very wide ranging effects. But how to use GHK is a big question. I've come to the conclusion that probably for me, 1 milligram a day on an ongoing basis might be a really good thing to do for periods of time. You've developed a new theory based on those studies that many of us don't always spend enough time with. And you've come up with a very interesting solution. So why don't you tell us?
Well, yeah. Okay, it's not a theory. It is in
yeah, I know.
research.
It's practice. Yeah.
It turns out that GHK is very short-lived, and there seems to be kind of a saturation point of it. There is so much you can take at once that you won't see the, and it seemed it's fairly low dosages. So anyway, to make it short, in that study, they found that they compared, they would give 1 milligram a day per hour for 10 hours. So a total of 10 milligrams. And they look at the effects that had, and then they saw that to get the same effect, if you were to give one shot, you would need to give 100 to 200 milligrams in one shot.
Wow.
No, and derivated from other studies, they concluded that actually you would need to take between 100 and 200 times more in one shot than if you split it over 10 hours, 10
so
shots.
You infuse it basically.
And it makes sense. That makes you see there is so much you can use at once.
Sure.
But if you take a mega shot, well, the half-life of a compound. So it's short. Let's say it's an hour, but
you'll still have enough left for a few hours.
But if you take 200 milligrams after an hour, you still have
100.
So you'll use some, and as it goes down, there is still floating around. So but you need that huge peak at the beginning, so you have enough over those 10, 12 hours.
Right.
So you're talking then bolus of 100 to 200 milligrams, which makes it not affordable.
I have a question before you go on. Yeah. Were they using GHK or GHK-Cu?
Sometimes they would mix them in a 1-to-1 ratio, sometimes only GHK.
Okay, carry on.
And a few studies only GHK-Cu, but that's before they found out that the GHK didn't need the copper because it will find it. And that you have to be careful too. Using the one with Cu, I think it's Lisa Patel that she mentioned.
You can end up with copper toxicity.
Yeah. At the beginning, they were feeling good, probably because they were deficient in copper, but they kept using it, and eventually it reached toxicity, and then they were not feeling good at all.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful about that.
Perfect.
So I think it's better to use without copper all the time, and make sure that your copper and zinc levels are in par, where they should be.
Yeah.
And you'll be okay. So the GHK will find the copper it needs, and no problem. So basically, what should be done? It doesn't have to be done year round. I still believe like 1-2 milligrams a day. But I think once in a while, maybe once, twice a year, you should go 2-3 weeks on that protocol where either you take 1 milligram every hour
Mm-hmm.
for 10, 12 hours.
Which is not going to fly in my world, just saying.
It's always the same story. The first 2, 3 days you do it. The fourth, fifth days, it's like you forget some. And usually within a week, it's, excuse my French, fuck that.
Yeah, you're done.
It's not viable except for a small percentage of the people. Myself, what I found as a solution is an insulin pump. So you hook it up and that's it. You get constant infusions over 12 to 24 hours. You program the thing, you wear it. It's a bit bothering the first day, but after that you forget it. And there you go. So if I could even, and those ones actually talking to a doctor in Toronto has been using them for years, is the one who gave me the idea. He was using it with peptides. He tried them all and he said the best is this model and you get it from China.
We can always post the reference in the show notes if people are interested.
Yeah, of course. And the thing is, they cost about $1,000 US. Plus you need to buy, the supply, the little tube and everything.
Yeah.
And again, but if you think about it, if you do 2-3 weeks with the GHK, you will get the equivalent results as if you had done 100 to 200 milligrams a day.
A day, yeah.
And if you would have done it, the first week, your pump will be paid.
Yeah. Yeah, for the price
because
of
the pump, you buy it once and it's good. Plus, it can be used for other peptides too that has been shown if you like Thymosin Alpha 1 and BPC 157.
BPC 157, yeah.
Are more effective if you spread out. Instead, if you need to increase the dosage, it's better to increase the frequency than the actual dose in every shot. Mm-hmm. So for some cases, it would be a better idea to infuse it with a pump like that. Same thing with Thymosin Alpha 1. You would get much more results. Again, it's not for everybody, but it's a biohacking group. This is biohacking.
This is biohacking 2.0 for sure. And I mean, I think that the things that people would have to watch out for here is you'd have to be pretty judicious with your hygiene.
The normal precautions.
Yeah, you have to take precautions. Just because you've got something in your skin, you've got something into your skin for many hours a day, so you do have to be judicious about your hygiene. So, and it's not, as Jean-François said, this is definitely biohacking 2.0. The 10 injections a day might be more somebody's speed.
Yeah, if you want that and budget wise, no problem. The best approach would be to do that. 1 milligram every hour for 10 hours will be the equivalent of doing 100, 200 milligrams in one shot. Yeah. So therapeutically, that would be a way.
And what are the benefits? What are the benefits that they talked about in that study? Just if people were thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, but why am I doing this? What's going to happen?
Okay, all the benefits you see, tissue repairs and all that. That's why you see amazing results in the abstract. And people, they say, yeah, GHK is great for tissue repair. And then they try it and it's like, no, not that good. Yeah, because you need to infuse it.
When you're talking tissue repair, you're talking also skin, like for anti-aging?
Skin, everything. When you apply it on the skin, it's a slow absorption. So you kind of have that infusion happening, but you get the effect mostly on the skin. But it's an amazing peptides of all the peptides in terms of repair. One effect you didn't mention is it repairs damaged DNA.
Oh, yeah.
And there are some.
I forgot about that.
I don't remember which cancer, but it's known that the cause of that cancer is up to 80% damaged DNA. Skin cancer is due to damaged DNA. So it's amazing. GHK is probably on top of all the other ones. It's the only peptide I always said, take as much as you can for as long as you can, what you can afford. It's the only one I would say never stop, take as much as you can. It's to me, it's the almost the, it's in my top 3.
Yeah.
It's an amazing one. But if you want to get the most bang for your buck, you need to go on the infusion. And I would do that maybe 3-4 times a year for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Where you do that 10-10. And then maintenance, you do 1-2 milligrams a day. But I think if you want that profound effect and much more as you get older, you need to go, or if it's therapeutic, you need to go through infusions.
So what do you, in your 20-hour day, how much GHK are you infusing? 10 milligrams?
10 milligrams. And I do it over 20 hours. I take 4-hour breaks a day. So it's 0.5 milligrams.
Yeah, an hour.
And there you go.
Yeah, no, that's, no, that would be, oh, yeah.
10 milligrams over 20 hours.
My number's reversed. Okay.
Most of the emails I get are about that.
What's
Simple
that?
Maths.
The math. Oh my God, the math.
It's crazy,
I know. I spend a lot of time doing math with people. It took me, but I will say that at the beginning, it took me a while to get my head around it. The biggest concept that people struggle with, and I think once they get their heads around this, things get easier. Once you understand there's 1,000 micrograms in a milligram, and then you understand basic ratios.
And don't feel bad. They have doctors.
Oh, everybody gets confused by it.
It's like, come on, how did you get into math school? You have like some math basic somewhere, and they just don't grab it. They
just can't get it. Yeah. But they do. Everybody eventually gets it. And once they get it, it's like, oh, okay. And then they're off to the right. But everybody comes to it in their own time. Okay. So I think we've covered all the things. Did we leave anything out? No,
it's pretty much it. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions popping up on the group. So we'll answer them there.
We will answer them in the group, or we will answer them in another podcast if there's enough to go to another podcast. So Jean-François, as always, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your generosity here. Thank you for your generosity in the groups. And for those of you who don't know, the group we're talking about is the it's the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group on Facebook. There's a Biohacking Superhuman Performance group on MeWe, although Jean-François and I are not nearly as active there as we are on Facebook at this point. CanLab Sciences is canlabsciences.com. If you decide to, for whatever reason, buy anything from CanLab, you can get 15% off with promo code OSP. O like optimizing, S like superhuman, P like performance, 15. And we appreciate you guys, both of us. I really enjoy doing these podcasts with you, Jean-François, and all the comments and questions that we both get as a result. Reaching out to Jean-François directly is a bit hit and miss because he's a pretty busy guy. He does his best. Usually through the group, on the Facebook group, most people will be able to get an answer eventually.
And many times from you, you're pretty good too with that.
I had a good teacher. So guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. This will be on YouTube as well. We used some images a couple of times, so the YouTube might actually be helpful in this one, especially at the beginning of the conversation when we were talking about LL37 and that vitamin D pathway. And I think that's all. I think I will bid you farewell and thank you again for your time.
Thank you.